Not wanting to take any chances, he summoned the Golden Rock Worm King once again. Once it was in the water, the creature arousing Han Sen's curiosity saw the Golden Rock Worm King approach. All of a sudden, it turned like an enraged bull. It charged at the Golden Rock Worm King and smashed into it. The hit was so severe that it went careering for miles across the seabed. Even though the super pet armor was mostly concave, the Golden Rock Worm King had almost been killed by this new foe. Han Sen wasn't surprised, so he quickly called back the Golden Rock Worm King. With power such as that, it had to be a sacred blood creature. It seemed that it was a creature that prioritized strength above all else. Han Sen guessed that it would not therefore possess any abilities that were too unusual. Han Sen summoned a beast soul and dived back into the waters. He approached the lizard-scaled bull. The big bull was not only aggressive but combative, too. After he saw Han Sen, it eagerly charged towards its next target. Due to it moving at great speed, a current and underwater wake followed its path. A great surf at least 10 meters high built up behind it, and made for a terrifying sight. Han Sen followed the water and dashed out of the way. After dodging the bull's fierce attack, the bull let out a weird, watery moan. Then it turned around and tried to charge Han Sen again. It was a frightening moment. Good timing, Han Sen said to himself. He cast his latest skill Tide to battle the bull. Han Sen had expended a great deal of effort in learning how to use Tide effectively, and without concerning himself with breathing. So any of his abilities could be cast naturally as the creatures he would be fighting would be underwater. He performed his underwater talents with the grace of a mermaid. Going up against this bull, there was nothing to handicap him. Dong! The ghost pod claw slashed the bull, which emitted a shower of sparks in the water. All it left, however, were 3 scuffs against the bull's lizard-like scales. It didn't cut through like Han Sen had anticipated. Those are some tough scales. Han Sen was surprised. He swam away to dodge the raging stampede of the bull. The next half hour was spent battling the bull. Han Sen had managed to get in numerous good hits, but no matter how hard he tried, he could not draw blood. The scales were too resilient. With his yin force, he punched the bull. Moo! The bull let out a frightened cry as its mouth spewed blood. But the stubbornness of the bull did not let up, and it did not fall back. It roared like thunder, and it dashed madly towards Han Sen again. He was not afraid of a creature that possessed mere brute force such as this, however. Han Sen's body was like Jiaolong as he spiraled through the water. He discovered another opening and struck the rampaging bull once more. The yin force punctured the bull's body and blood gushed out of its mouth. Cow, cow, cow. A huge amount of yin force was drilling its way into the bull's body. It did not matter how strong its body was or how resilient its scales were, nothing could withstand the yin force. The bull was being beaten to a pulp as blood streamed from its mouth, ears and nose, and its organs had been dealt critical damage. It was by now too late for the bull to even think of retreating. It had been struck by Han Sen's yin force dozens of times. The creature's heart had been mashed into jelly and its body was limp in the sea. Sacred blood creature hunted, water buffalo. The beast's soul was not acquired. Consume its flesh to obtain a random amount of sacred geno points, between 0 and 10. Han Sen was overjoyed. He had already received the ability that enabled trouble-free underwater sacred blood battling, and all he had to do was track one down before fighting it. He no longer had to worry about a lack of resources. Hopefully, I can maximize my sacred geno points in the near future. Han Sen's heart was ecstatic. Han Sen was excited. Already, he was preparing to search for another high-class lonely creature of the sea. But all of a sudden, he felt goosebumps, and his chirpy mood was quashed by a foreboding sense of dread. Stop! Don't move! Han Sen called out to the mermaid princess to stop the Crystal Palace. As far as they knew, the Crystal Palace was indestructible. Now that he was safely inside, there should have been no danger. But still, Han Sen felt something wasn't quite right. He couldn't shake the feeling that something awful was about to occur, and because of the worry, his body kept breaking out in cold sweats. Ever since he had learnt the first tier of ice skin, his perception had heightened and its sensitivity had continued growing. Han Sen was a man who put a lot of stock in his ability to perceive what was happening. He didn't move an inch. He used his eyes to peer through the windows of the Crystal Palace and into the creeping black of the deep sea. All of a sudden, a large creature appeared in Han Sen's vision. It was a 30-meter-long silver shark. Its body was composed of metallic scales. As it swam, great waves followed in its wake. The giant silver shark was terrifying to look at. But after Han Sen gave it a thorough look, he realized that it wasn't the crux of his anxiety. This wasn't what had made him scared. The silver shark opened its mouth, attempting to swallow a scarily large amount of fish. As if they were to be consumed by a sealing cave entrance, the fish that had felt the danger began swimming in a frantic panic. It was chaos. As this happened, Hansen caught sight of a small blue light in the distance. It was getting nearer, and as it did, the power of the blue light increased. It then began to jump strangely around. As the blue light drew nearer and nearer, the concern in Hansen's heart grew. When it finally reached a discernible distance, Hansen at last saw what it was. It was a 3-meter-tall seahorse. Its body was shining blue, as if it was wrapped in a blue, blazing flame. A giant blue seahorse. Its skin, although blue, was quite faint, faded like the bark of an old, withered tree. Its eyes were the opposite, however, sparkling like 2 refined sapphires. A cold blue light shone from within them. If you stared into those eyes, it would feel as if you were being drawn into a bottomless well of despair. Hansen's forehead was dripping with a cold sweat, and the droplets had already reached his cheeks. As he watched the seahorse, he did not move a muscle. That which he had feared was confirmed in the presence of this new sea creature. As the seahorse neared, the silver shark's giant body came to a standstill in the water. It then began shivering, as if it had just seen something most awful. The seahorse did not swim in haste, instead drifting steadily towards the shark. The closer the seahorse came, the more the shark shook. Still, it was locked in place, seemingly unable to move. Eventually, the seahorse reached the giant silver shark. Although the seahorse wasn't particularly small, it was dwarfed when compared to the silver shark. How strange it was to see a silver shark of that size be terrified by such a small seahorse. The metal scales that plated the shark rattled in fear. The blue seahorse took a look at the shark, then opened its mouth like a speaker. A blue flame exited its mouth, yet was not extinguished by the sea water. The flame was shot at the shark's silver scales. The small blue flame was only about the size of a fist. But when it came into contact with the shark, the entire creature lit up in flames. The blue flame raged in the water. The giant silver shark writhed in agony, but still refused to flee. The body did move, but only through convulsing from the pain it was attempting to endure. It was an unnerving scene to behold. A moment later, the giant silver shark was nothing but cinder. Here, deep below the sea, a shark had been incinerated into little more than ash. The blue flame then went out, as the dust of its victim fell to become one with the sandy seabed. Hansen, after witnessing all of this, was scared. He could not help but think, super creature. This thing must be a super creature from the second shelter. Although he had yet to witness the true strength of the seahorse, all it took was the sight of that blue flame to suggest where it had come from. While Hansen stood motionless in fear, the seahorse turned to face the window he was looking out of. All of a sudden, Hansen's body felt cold. A chill in his heart had taken root, and was expanding. All the seahorse did, however, was stare. Following that, it turned tail and left. Only a short time after, it had completely disappeared in the black of the deep sea. Once it had gone, Hansen fell onto the floor as collapsing from exhaustion. The clothes on his were soaked from his sweat. That was terrifying. How strong must that super creature have been? The way it looked and how it behaved was scary enough. Hansen's voice trembled as he spoke. The flame that the seahorse had spat out spooked Hansen. The thought of a creature possessing a flame that could incinerate a giant sacred blood creature into ash while submerged deep beneath the sea was a terrifying thing. Seeing that the direction in which the seahorse left was the way to the seabed shelter, Hansen endured another chill. Is the seabed shelter the one that resides above a royal spirit shelter? While Hansen was still feeling frightened, he saw a blue flame arise in the distance. What poor creature had fallen prey to the seahorse this time? Hansen gritted his teeth and commanded the mermaid princess to sail the crystal palace slowly in the direction the seahorse had gone. He did not dare go too quickly as he fixed his eyes on the blue flame in the distance. Hansen thought it wasn't fair, and wanted to see if the seahorse was a creature from the seabed shelter. In order to learn more, he now sought to follow it. Before long, Hansen was disappointed. They reached an area not far from the seabed shelter, and he realized that the seahorse did indeed head towards it. The water around the crystal palace was now blue and as bright as the daytime. Hansen's face changed, as if he had just thought of something. He looked back in the direction of the seabed shelter and saw it engulfed in a blue flame. It was like a blue purgatory, where a strange blue light burned like mad. What's going on? That blue seahorse just incinerated the entire shelter. Hansen watched as the shelter was engulfed in blue flames. His mind froze in shock. The blue flames reached 12 miles in length, and they writhed around the entirety of the seabed shelter. Stranger still was the fact that no spirit or creature seemed to have escaped from there. The area that surrounded the shelter was quiet. The only motion to be seen was that of the seabed shelter, now composed of blue flames like hell. So bright were the flames that the whole sea was now illuminated in blue. The fires blazed across the seabed for an hour, and when the sea's new color finally dimmed, the seabed shelter had become nothing more than a mound of ash. Had the blackened, charred dust not remained on the clear sand of the seabed, Han Sen would not have believed that the place known as the seabed shelter had even existed. Seeing the shadow of the blue seahorse fade from sight, Han Sen at last dared to sail the Crystal Palace closer to where the seabed shelter had once thrived. The seabed for the surrounding dozens of miles was now a charred landscape. Nothing remained. The lethal fire had erased all that once was. Han Sen shivered, and his heart was struck with a genuine fear. He could not imagine how powerful that blue seahorse must be to reduce a shelter that was a dozen miles long into nothing more than dust and echoes. If the super creatures are all as frightening as that blue seahorse, although I have perfected 4 of my genes, I don't believe I could compete with them. Would I be able to withstand a lick of that blue flame? Han Sen was concerned with the thought of the blue seahorse returning, so he ordered the mermaid princess to sail the Crystal Palace away. After leaving the area, Han Sen's mind became a little calmer. When he was amidst the rubble and remains of the shelter, he saw which direction the seahorse had gone. It was towards the seabed trench, a frightful place that looked like a crack that could lead into hell. Han Sen looked in that direction and felt terrified, shaking off the remote thought of giving chase to the creature. The water buffalo that Han Sen slew was able to provide enough food for the next month. After seeing the blue seahorse, however, Han Sen's interest in hunting in the deep sea waned significantly. How might I kill that blue seahorse? If I could obtain its beast soul, I can't imagine how terrifying it would be for others. Han Sen's heart, when thinking this, was in equal parts excitement and fearful concern. While he was in the first shelter, it was incredibly difficult for Han Sen to slay a super creature. It wouldn't be until he had a group of super soldiers by his side that he could kill one. The super creatures of the second shelter were even scarier. Han Sen didn't know whether he could kill one, even if he managed to maximize his sacred geno points. If he couldn't, it would all be down to his usage of hyper geno arts. Still, he couldn't risk rushing his learning of the Dongsu Sutra, and he had no idea when he would manage to open his first gene lock. Having now returned to the Alliance, Han Sen planned to pay another visit to the virtual training camp in the army base so that he could further practice duel. His musings over whether he could slay a super creature were unrealistic at best, but his prior target of a twin spirit would be a fine foe to take on next. The mermaid princess was able to control the Crystal Palace, so it was possible that the twin spirit had similar advantages of its own. He could think about what he could do with it once he had obtained it. Perhaps it would come in handy further down the line, when he wanted to take on a super creature. After seeing the blue seahorse, Han Sen now resolved to improve his power through any means necessary. Just as he entered the virtual training camp, he was invited to duel. It was from Qin Xuan's virtual training camp ID, Zhang Fei. Han Sen accepted and entered this Zhang Fei's room. "Coach, do you have the time to provide another lesson?" Qin Xuan looked at Han Sen with hopeful eyes. "No lessons today, but I did learn a new sword skill recently. Perhaps you would like to train alongside me?" Han Sen asked casually. He did not know that his opponent would be Qin Xuan. He merely thought that Zhang Fei was a good fighter he hadn't met before. To train duel with her would be fine. Han Sen's dual sword skill had been significantly modified. Although not yet perfect, it was a complete dual blade sword skill. Qin Xuan was using a dagger. She thought she was going to be attacked by a mad hurricane of sorts, but it wasn't so. Although Han Sen's attacks came in strongly, they weren't very powerful. This confused Qin Xuan. Why would an elite such as Han Sen bother to learn a skill that wasn't all that potent? This was because Qin Xuan assumed Han Sen's character was some mighty elite, and didn't know it was actually Han Sen himself. She didn't doubt his decision, however, and only mulled over why he would select such a skill. Quickly, Qin Xuan noticed the problem and recognized the sword skill Han Sen was using. She thought to herself, isn't that a sword skill traditionally cast by 2 people? He's actually using a sword skill designed for 2, isn't he? Is he modifying it for use by only 1 person? Qin Xuan had seen the skill in action before, and after recognizing it, felt quite surprised. A person had to be a strong elite to be able to modify an S-class skill that way. Who would spend that much time and effort to do it, as this person had? Besides, modifying a 2-person skill into a solo skill, wasn't that pointless? If he had that time, why did he even bother learning a 2-person skill? To have the time and effort to commit to something like that, he must have been really bored or something. Qin Xuan did not dare to slow down and gave battle with Han Sen all that she could. If not for her own self-improvement, then perhaps for his benefit. With the skills Qin Xuan possessed, she quickly noticed that there are many flaws and issues with Han Sen's modified skill, so she put more focus onto her offense to try to reveal those errors to him. Qin Xuan trained with Han Sen for quite some time. She noticed that he kept changing the skill and improving its efficiency as he went on. The longer they battled, the more powerful Qin Xuan believed Han Sen to be. No matter what flaw or weak point she discovered, after her first attack to draw attention to it, he quickly had it fixed and it would never appear again, demonstrating an efficiency she admired. Qin Xuan thought he must have only started modifying it and did not know he had actually been improving it for a long time. He had uncovered many issues in his previous testing of the skill, but had then lacked the opportunities to trial it further. With Qin Xuan's help in highlighting all the issues, the sword skill rapidly nearing completion. Qin Xuan had witnessed a two-person sword skill become a skill for wielding by one, and she was taken aback. The most surprising thing for her, however, was Han Sen's ability to effectively control two things with one mind. Both of his hands were able to cast a sword skill, which made her feel as if she was actually doing battle with two people. No wonder he isn't going to St. Hall to learn the dual sword skill. There are no strange sword skills there. This modified dual skill really is amazing. Qin Xuan held great admiration for Han Sen in her heart. Having learnt and watched Han Sen modify the dual sword skill, she wanted to see if she could learn the skill for herself. Han Sen left the virtual training camp in a good mood. After practicing with Zhang Fei, the dual sword skill had significantly improved. Han Sen took a shower, all the while humming a song. When he was done, he lay down on the bed right as his communicator rang. Taking a look at who was calling, he saw it was Qin Xuan. Qin Xuan, it's very late for you to be calling. I can only assume you don't have a boyfriend, Han Sen joked with her. Qin Xuan served the army, but the two frequently stayed in touch. Although they no longer traveled in the same circles, Han Sen was still used to calling her team Qin. I often go on blind dates, it's just that I have yet to meet someone suitable. Qin Xuan did not care too much for these things. Casually, she continued, I heard Young Manly has been talking about you. You've been doing a great job, and she was complimenting you a good deal. I almost thought it was a manly doppelganger. To have Team Qin compliment me makes my deeds worth the effort. Han Sen laughed, but wanted to change the subject. Qin Xuan recognized this. She rolled her eyes and said nothing more about it. She blinked and then said, Did you go to the virtual training camp? Yeah. Han Sen was going to tell her his virtual training camp ID, but Qin Xuan went on and said, Earlier, I met an elite in the virtual training camp, and I've learnt a lot from him. What kind of elite? Han Sen asked. I presume it was a great general in the army, or even a top surpasser. What was this elite's ID? It was a little soldier on the battleship. Have you seen him before? Qin Xuan asked. No, absolutely not. Han Sen replied quickly. He was shocked, for he did not know that Qin Xuan was Xuan Fei. It's okay if you haven't. There's no need to look nervous about it. What's your ID in the training camp? Qin Xuan asked. I'm afraid I won't be able to visit the training camp for some time. Tell me your ID and I'll add you the next time I am there. Zhang Fei. Well, who is the emperor? Han Sen knew that Qin Xuan was Zhang Fei, so he laughed. No one has yet shown they possess the right qualities to become my emperor. Qin Xuan pouted slightly as she said this. When I was in school, my ID was Black Fist Emperor. Do you want to team up with me, since I am an emperor? Sure, you come here. Qin Xuan smiled at Han Sen. Han Sen suddenly had an unpleasant feeling. He slanted his head and said, Actually, perhaps not. As emperor, even I may not be able to handle you. You talk such rot. If I tell Jai Yanran later, I'd like to see how you will be tortured. I'm going for a shower now. After that, Qin Xuan hung up. This is too much of a coincidence. Zhang Fei is Team Qin. Han Sen licked his lips. He was wondering if she secretly knew that he was the great elite she kept referring to. If she didn't, what would she look like if he told her? Han Sen was thinking of a way in which he could prank her the next time they met. That would be sweet justice for the last time prank she had played on him. Before Han Sen could think of a way, the communicator rang once more. This time, it was Young Manly. After he answered, he saw Young Manly dressed only in her pajamas. Her snow-white shoulders were exposed, as were her lovely, snow-white legs. Han Sen complimented her by saying, It is a little cold, but those legs are amazing. I could play with those beautiful legs for many years. Han Sen then felt a little strange. Young Manly was a serious person on most occasions, and very rarely would you see her not wearing her military or battle outfits. Why would Young Manly change her clothes and suddenly start talking to him in her pajamas? Something is wrong. Young Manly's face did not look well, and her speaking was rushed. What happened? Han Sen furrowed his eyebrows. If Young Manly was in such a hurry, then it must have something to do with the goddess shelter. Some people from outside have discovered our shelter. There are dozens of them. I think they are the people you spoke of out in the ice fields. Young Manly said. Do you know which shelter they come from? Han Sen looked serious, too. Someone asked them, and they said they were from the Black God's shelter. Black God and his troops had at last arrived at the empty field of the mountain, the one that stretched out before the walls of the goddess' shelter. Over 200 of the Black God's elite were mounted atop snow wolves, and were lined up in formation. The 6 evolvers Black God had brought with him spearheaded the formation. They too rode beasts, and the eyes of everyone on that field were now fixed upon the goddess' shelter ahead of them. Where did all these people come from? Is there another shelter nearby? Of course there is. Our goddess' shelter does not possess that many elites. Look at the formation they are in. It seems as if they are going to attack our shelter. The commoners of the goddess' shelter were in heated discussion about the events currently unfolding. Black God was riding a unicorn black wolf. Its eyes glistened with a striking iciness. The beast took 2 steps forward, and Black God unsheathed a black long sword. He raised it towards the sight of Han Sen, who was standing on the tower above the gate of the city. He then said aloud, "I am the Black God army's leader, Black God. Han Sen is both a shameless and obscene person. He sneak attacked me with a brutal poison, and I almost died. Today, I have come to put an end to the grudge I harbor against this horrible man. This is between me and him. If the rest of you lay down your arms, I will grant you your lives. Those who aid Han Sen and try to stop me exacting my revenge will be mercilessly slain." After the speech, Black God rattled the longsword in his hand and cut in half a glacier that was in front of him. The strength of such a strike struck fear into the hearts of those in the goddess' shelter. "Kill!" The 200 evolvers behind Black God screamed this word together. So loud was it. It was though the sky had been torn asunder by a savage clap of thunder. He is too strong. Black God is an elite with over 100 sacred genopoints, and the people behind him are powerful evolvers. With just the minuscule forces of the goddess' shelter, how can we hope to beat them? He had it coming. People like Han Sen should have died a long time ago. Yes, he did have it coming. Han Sen doesn't know his place, and what he has done recently has been too much. He sneak attacked someone with poison. Now that those people are after him, he's a dead man walking. Their lust for his blood is total. Will he flee back to the Alliance? I can't see him getting out of this predicament in any other way. Boss, should we retreat? Uncle King furrowed his brow. The power on display from Black God was clearly far beyond what the goddess' shelter could repel. No, you guys stay here, Han Sen said calmly. He stared at Black God and his army of 200 evolvers. Han Sen leapt from the gate's tower and landed on the field before the gate. Alone, he ventured towards Black God. Black God raised his hand and signaled for the army to stay put. He sternly watched Han Sen approach and smiled. What is Han Sen going over there for, all alone? Idiot. But oh well, what else can he do? It looks like he is surrendering already. The gulf in power cannot be bridged. He can't fight. Here, Han Sen, who has been so cocky all this time, is finally getting what's coming to him. He deserves it. Perhaps most people did think that the gap in power between the two forces was too large, and that Han Sen was going out there to surrender. Black God, how dare you show yourself to my shelter? Have you forgotten how brutally beaten you were, following our last duel? To lose is no shame, but only the truest of victors gets the last laugh, and that will be me. Black God sneered. I admit that you possess great individual power, but this is no longer a duel. If you surrender now, I will spare your life. If you refuse to concede, then take one last look at those in your command. They, as well as you, will be slain. I assume you are relying on the strength provided by these people behind you, those that are in your service. Han Sen gave the evolvers that were lined up behind Black God another look. Yes, I have 6 evolvers that have over 100 sacred genopoints and 237 evolvers that have more 60 sacred genopoints. Destroying your shelter will be easy, Black God said with disdain. Murmurs of concern could be heard from the goddess' shelter. At first, only Uncle King, Yang Manly and Zhu Ting could understand the strength and power that Black God commanded before their gates. But hearing what Black God had said, the rest of the populace was beginning to understand, too. To know that there were 6 evolvers with over 100 sacred genopoints and 237 evolvers with over 60 sacred genopoints were preparing to descend upon them made the people rightly fearful. In the goddess' shelter, there were only about 10 people with a fitness level above 60. Han Sen was the sole figure known to be over 100. But now, their opponents had 7 with over 100. The power gulf was too large to bridge. That means we have to fight today then, does it not? Han Sen's face remained impassive as he waited for Black God to speak. Kneel to me, plead before me for forgiveness over your sins and transgressions, and then give me your shelter. Do this, and I will spare your life. Black God's mouth curled in a sneer as he looked at Han Sen. He was not willing to settle for the death of Han Sen today. He was determined to take ownership of the shelter. If he could force Han Sen concede, then he would not have to expend resources in claiming another shelter. Han Sen laughed and then said, "That's a shame." Coldly, Black God said, "And what is a shame, exactly? Soon, you will find out that what you rely on is puny and ridiculous. It's a shame you won't be given the opportunity to laugh anymore." As Han Sen said this, his legs spurred up with the strength of triumphant stallion. He galloped towards Black God. "Is he crazy?" the people screamed in the goddess shelter. No one had expected Han Sen to charge at the Black God army all by himself. There were 7 evolvers with over 100 sacred Geno points, and over 200 elite evolvers that had over 60 sacred Geno points. If Black God's army was a formation of hefty rocks, the goddess shelter was a basket of eggs. For Han Sen to rush into the enemy looked like a futile suicide mission. "How dare you!" Black God shouted. He lifted his black longsword to signal his 6 supreme evolvers to step forward, attempt to block Han Sen's coming, and to potentially surround him. From what Black God was seeing, he too now assumed Han Sen to be a suicidal maniac. This was bizarre because he personally knew how powerful he was. Crazy. This man is crazy. Wretched people meet a wretched fate. How unsurprising. We should open the gate while he is away and roll out the red carpet, give Black God a proper welcome. You know, just in case they decide to kill us after they're done using Han Sen as a chew toy. Yes, get that gate open. Let's welcome them in. A few commoners went out towards the gate and attempted to open it. "I'll kill whoever gets close to this gate, you hear me?" Young Manly stared down those who had ventured forward, while bellowing at them. The goddess army that was guarding the gate then turned around to raise their weapons at any would-be meddlers. Seeing them receive such a hostile reaction, the commoners became afraid and stopped their approach. Vice Leader Yang. Han Sen is rushing out and welcoming his demise with open arms. There is no reason for you to die alongside him. We seek to open this gate for the benefit of everyone. Yes, Han Sen may not want to live, but we do. He is like an egg playing conkers with a stone. Oh, Vice Leader Yang, you are so pretty. Do not squander your beauty like this. Although they did not dare to march any closer to the gate, they were still willing to argue with Young Manly. Instead of being this worried now, you should be more concerned about what will happen when we beat Black God, Young Manly stated coldly. The commoners all felt a chill run down their spine. Outside the gate, out on the battlefield, Han Sen was racing into the enemy's army. His hands were empty, having not summoned a single weapon. He did not even wear armor, either. He might as well have been naked. The 6 evolvers instantly launched forwards to fight Han Sen. They wielded beast soul weaponry, and unleashed their evil powers as they leapt towards Han Sen. But Han Sen was incredibly fast, and even at the high speed he was going, he could take sharp turns without slowing down. He avoided 2 attacks that came towards him by quickly dodging left and right, then pushed on towards Black God. The 4 evolvers were alarmed at Han Sen's advance, and attempted to cut him down before he could come any closer. But Han Sen possessed the agility of a bird, and to move as he did, while maintaining his furious speed, was almost like magic. Within a second, he had got past the 4 that had attempted to stop him. He was unbelievably fast, and he was unbelievably strong. Not one of the 6 evolvers had managed to stop Han Sen, and now, this solo assassin had nothing to stop him. Once he passed the 6 evolvers, Han Sen advanced towards Black God. Impossible. Black God was shocked. It hadn't been that long since their last match together, but his powers had increased immeasurably. With a speed like this, heaven knows how much better he was now. Every step he took was in between someone's blind spot. He could swerve into places they could not reach, take advantage of a soul-misplaced footstep, and manipulate enemies to exhaust their powers. It was an incredible rush for Han Sen to be able to do these things. It was as if he had entered God mode. With his great ability to perceive unfolding events, it was as if he was watching battles from high above. If he was once a chess piece, he had now become the player himself. Everything had fallen under his control. "Kill him," Black God shouted. As he did, Black God fell back. He had no idea why. But as he looked into the eyes of his fierce, lone attacker, a chill fell upon him. He started falling back even further. He did not dare to engage Han Sen in direct, one-to-one combat. The 237 evolvers were heavily armed, and they worked together to surround Han Sen. Young Manly was waiting alongside her team, watching the field with shredded nerves. With the killing abilities they appeared to possess, victory over them was something not even a collection of hardened elites could pull off. Her anxiety over the well-being of Han Sen became even greater, and Han Sen was not wearing any armor. His entire body was exposed and weak, so to believe he could survive a battlefield in such conditions was an extremely dangerous endeavor. He was only wearing a traditional combat outfit that was standard issue for the Alliance. But now suddenly Han Sen changed, as a red armor suddenly appeared to clothe his entire body. His short hair grew into a stream of long, blonde locks. His eyes sparkled with the color of gold and a ruby crown was lifted upon his head to decorate his new appearance. After his sudden transformation into a fairy queen, the whole world seemed to slow down in Han Sen's vision. The spears that had been coming towards him like arrows had slowed to a crawl. He danced like a butterfly, or more menacingly like a wild bat in the dark. His body moved incredibly quickly, managing to weave its way between the swordsmen and their spears. He formed a gap between the ranks of the assaulting formation, and after breaching through, ran towards Black God. Every evolver Han Sen passed by possessed a confusion in their heart. The position Han Sen chose to breach was strange to them. It looked as if he were going to go in another direction, but when they turned to look, he was back where he had started. Whenever they wanted to strike, Han Sen was already gone. With these godlike powers possessing his body, he was unstoppable. The evolvers on the battlefield felt hopeless and frustrated. Black God's face looked like mud. He could not believe that his formation, composed of over 200 evolvers, was unable to prevent Han Sen's advance. And he was frightened. Han Sen's power had reached such a degree that calling him strong was no longer fitting. He was almost inhuman. Kill him, Black God screamed as he continued to retreat. His heart felt as if it had been stabbed with ice. Han Sen's performance had been too frightening to watch, and still, Black God lacked the courage to battle his most despised enemy. The 6 evolvers from the front rushed back and caught up with Han Sen, who was now just beyond the formation and going for Black God. Their spears were like wretched dragons and their swords were like soaring eagles. Han Sen leaped into the sky and danced across the swords and spears of his enemies, before jumping towards Black God. The ability to obtain power from the air and enable a person to leap again was extraordinary. People didn't believe their eyes. Treading Cloud from the Chan family, although not as effective as 7 twists which borrowed strength from the air itself 7 times, was enough for Han Sen to reach Black God. Black God was a hard, tough person. Seeing Han Sen fly towards him, he knew that it was now too late for him to turn back. Die! Black God screamed. His black longsword disappeared at the speed of light and reappeared directly in front of Han Sen's face. He cast Tornado Knife twice as quickly. Seeing his black sword appear so close to Han Sen's beautiful Apollo-like face, Black God suddenly felt a numbness in his arm. The arm that held the sword could no longer be controlled, and he watched as it flew upwards. The sword nicked Han Sen's face and drew a shallow rivulet of blood. A few strands of golden hair were also cut and were carried off in the wind. Han Sen used his fist to block Black God's tornado knife, though none could see how, due to the speed at which events were happening. Almost at the same time, Han Sen's other hand performed a totally different action. His hand took the shape of a blade and shone like a bolt of lightning. Without warning, it swept forward like the attack of a ghostly assassin. Black God wanted to pull back his arm and attack again, but he noticed his vision begin to fade. Han Sen's face looked further away, and he felt as if he was flying, joining Han Sen in the air. To Black God this all felt bizarre. In his vision, he now saw a familiar body, plated in black armor. The body was sitting upon a black wolf, but it lacked a head. From the stump of the body's neck, a fountain of blood spurted out. The battlefield went quiet. Everyone's eyes were now fixed on the airborne head, and they all looked astounded, unable to fathom what they were seeing. The master of the Black God's shelter, the strongest man on the ice fields, the warrior who possessed the disappearing demon knife. His head had been cut off by a hand stemming from the middle of his army's formation. Everyone was rattled, distraught, as if they had all been frozen. All they could do was stare at the blonde man who looked like a god. Young Manly's face was red with excitement, and her beautiful eyes sparkled. Her heart was pumping like mad. Even she could hardly believe Han Sen had been able to kill Black God in such a fashion, in such a desperate situation. The formation that had faced him had been almost nothing to him. He had just waved his hand and ripped the head off, quick and clean, smooth as butter. Such unbelievable power. No wonder he is an heir of Coach Han. Uncle King looked bewildered as he spoke. The people wanting to open the gate were flabbergasted. They could not believe Han Sen had able to run up to such a mighty elite, surrounded by his great army, and slay him like so. Within 2 to 3 minutes, it was all over. Those few people felt a chill assault their necks, and they couldn't help but run their fingers around it. They felt that when Han Sen came back and found out how they had behaved, they'd all be headless within a few seconds. Many people started running towards the teleporter, consumed by fear. Han Sen had managed to hack someone's head off as if it were a game, in the midst of a huge battle. The Moners lacked the protection of the army, and neither were they elite evolvers that might have been able to fend for themselves. Their legs were turning to jelly as they made off to the teleporters. The 6 supreme evolvers remained frozen. They had witnessed many strong people in their time, but this was unlike anything they had ever seen before. One single man, targeting the head of his opposition like a rocket, had managed to dance and weave through an army to get to his objective. Their army, their hearts were chilled, and they abandoned all thoughts of fighting. Han Sen, we only took orders from Black God. One evolver spoke out amidst the silence. We followed his command, that was it. We have no personal desire for conflict with you. Right now, Black God is dead and there would be nothing to gain from further combat. Can we end it all now and call for a truce? Whoever attacks my shelter is an enemy. My enemies are not for you to determine, Han Sen coldly said. If we fight for our lives, you might not have the advantage, another elite said. Still, his voice trembled with the obvious desire to flee and not be forced to engage with Han Sen. Since you are here, then you must have your answer. If you fight, we fight until the last man is standing. If not, then you will join my goddess army. You will follow me as I lead an assault to destroy the Black God shelter. This will make you a soldier of the goddess army. Han Sen looked at them gleefully. The evolvers sounded as if they were hesitating. They were already frightened, and seeing the godly-looking Han Sen, the last thing they wanted was to fight him. Although there were 200 evolvers with them, they still didn't feel safe. But to surrender to him and take down the Black God shelter, they were afraid whether their main leader back in the alliance would let them go so easily. I know the person called Dong Lin. After you return, you can register with me. Han Sen already knew much of the Black God's dealings and affairs from Tang Zhenliu, so knew enough to make this suggestion. Hearing this, they no longer hesitated. True or false, Han Sen had already given them a reason not to fight. Stricken with fear, the last thing they wanted to do was battle. We are willing to join the goddess shelter and follow your lead, numerous evolvers spoke in unison. The people in the goddess shelter were amazed, as all of this was happening so quickly. They had been lusting for their blood a few minutes prior, and yet here they were now, yielding to the command of Han Sen. In their eyes, the power of the Black God army was still strong. It was not as if they could fight back, so why would they so readily concede? The Black God's shelter had had a change in ownership in the span of a single night. This was news that startled many. The Black God shelter also changed its name, becoming the Goddess Shelter. The same also applied to the smaller branches of the Black God shelter, so that they too adopted the new name of Goddess Shelter. No one was entirely sure what happened, and why everything had suddenly changed. Did you know that Han Sen is 8 feet tall, and his waist is 8 feet wide, too? He has the strength of a monster. Black God brought 3,000 elite evolvers with him, and they battled together for 3 days and 3 nights. And guess what? Han Sen didn't even get a scratch. Are you sure? I heard it was an army of 30,000 that set out to attack Han Sen, and he effortlessly killed 10,000 people, which turned the rivers red with blood. The corpses, when stacked together, formed an entirely new mountain, and that was after filling a canyon. When it was all over, everyone in the Black God army was killed, which led to the Black God shelter surrendering. What are you guys talking about? Han Sen is an extremely beautiful woman. I don't believe it. How can Han Sen be a woman? That's a man's name. Well, you're missing something. Either way. You see, there was a really touching story in the midst of everything. And it was all about me. Han Sen and I used to be neighbors, and not many people know about this, but back in the day, the legends that surrounded Han Sen, out on the ice fields, quickly spiraled into madness. But despite the constant additions to the tales that were told, one thing remained constant. Han Sen had been able to bring down the Black God shelter in one night. The real warriors, like Lai Xinglun and Brother Philip, upon hearing the news, found it difficult to believe what had happened. It was more shocking for them to hear that than if Han Sen had managed to slay 30,000 evolvers with a single slap. Killing people was easy, but taking over territory was incredibly difficult. And to hear that Han Sen had managed to take over all the territory Black God previously owned was quite frightening. The reason why Han Sen had been able to effortlessly take ownership of the Black God shelter was the aid given to him by Tang Zhenliu. Tang Zhenliu used to say that if Han Sen managed to kill Black God, then he would be able to easily take over his power. Han Sen had simply decided to try it. He had then asked Tang Zhenliu for assistance. If Tang Zhenliu was able to do it, then Han Sen would have no issue with claiming ownership of the Black God shelter. If Tang Zhenliu could not do it, then he would at the very least resort to ransacking and taking what he could from the place. Without enough people to take over a shelter, it would be a demanding task, but looting the place could be fruitful. In the end, Tang Zhenliu really did manage to take care of the people who had previously supported Black God. Wei Xinglun and Brother Philip were relieved that Han Sen was not interested in becoming a self-imposed king of the ice fields. Taking over the Black God shelter had presented him with many benefits, however. Not only would he receive income from the Black God shelter, he would even obtain the swaths of information and intelligence that the Black God shelter held in its possession. There were many sacred blood-class creatures residing across the ice fields. Although the Black God shelter could not eliminate them, their record-keeping housed a great deal of useful information on them. He wanted to find out more about this so-called Jade Sun Force. The search engine quickly presented numerous articles. It looked as if it was a fairly popular hyper-geno art. Han Sen picked a site at random. Do you want to stay long and hard? Do you want your partner or wife to moan and scream all night? Do you have problems staying hard or finishing too soon? If you said yes to any of these, then the Jade Sun Force is here for you. It will train you to become a man with a golden sword. You will soon be slaying your wife in bed, breaking her voice as she screams your name. What are you waiting for? Come order it today. Learn this and become a real man. What? Han Sen almost spat out the tea he was drinking. What the hell is this? He clicked on another link, but that too offered to sell the same hyper-geno art, one that was related to the suffering of an unhealthy kidney. Han Sen quickly realized that this was indeed a famous hyper-geno art. There were many different types of Jade Sun Force on the Skynet, each having been slightly modified to suit the various needs of different people. It was not unlike the skill panorama. They were all mostly the same, though. The Jade Sun Force was a hyper-geno art that seemed to be designed for the strengthening of a person's kidney. But its versatility lent itself well to the aiding and correction of many different sicknesses and debilitations which could afflict men. What is wrong with this Zhu Ting? Do I look like I need this skill? I could do it with 10 women in one night. Han Sen felt as if his very dignity had been slighted. Even his disposition had taken a nasty blow. It was no wonder Zhu Ting had told him to check the hyper-geno art out on his own. Besides, this cheap crap is all over Skynet. There is no need for me to buy it, I can just find it. The communicator rang. He accepted the call, and a beautiful image presented itself. It was Huang Fu Ping King. Sister, your beauty only increases as the days go by. Han Sen saw Huang Fu Ping King look both mature and attractive, and he couldn't help himself from complimenting her appearance as soon as he laid eyes on her. There was no harm in offering compliments. Besides, she used to be of great aid to him. Huang Fu Ping King looked happy, and her face bore the most incredible smile. But then she froze, looked past Han Sen vacantly and sighed. Did my face grow flowers? Han Sen touched his face, wondering why she looked at him in the way she did. Little brother must be tired these days. After a moment, she said, although you are young, you should attend to your rest. Your body's health receives no reward from overexerting itself. She called him, spoke some inane blabber and then hung up. What could she have wanted? Thinking of that, Han Sen turned around to look at his monitor. He froze. Do you want to stay hard and long? Do you? The advert was still fully displayed, and he quickly understood what had happened. He understood why Huang Fu Ping King had acted strangely, and hung up hurriedly. No, no. Han Sen felt like he was in trouble, and frantically called up Huang Fu Ping King. This was really bad. If she told people that Han Sen was unable to perform effectively, he couldn't imagine the embarrassment. How would the girls he knew view him then? A chill ran down his spine just thinking about it. Shortly after, the communicator was connected. Sister, listen to me. Let me explain. Han Sen then tried to tell her why that advert had been on his screen. But he had only spoken 2 sentences before Huang Fu Ping King responded by saying, There is no need for you to explain your issue to me. I am not who you are. The woman from the Jai family is pretty, and you can do to her whatever you see fit. That has nothing to do with me. She didn't give Han Sen the chance to explain, and hung up before he could start talking again. But then the communicator rang with someone else on the line. Han Sen was getting frustrated, and wanted to call her back so he could explain. He was going to push the call button, but his finger slipped to press receive. Jai Yanren's image appeared, and gave Han Sen a fright. As Jai Yanren looked at Han Sen, she had a sweet smile, but that soon disappeared as well. Han Sen wanted to slap himself for having forgotten to close the advert again. He tried to explain, Calm down, Yanren. It isn't what you think. I've found some time today so that I may do it with you. But it's okay. It would be best if you go and train. I'll gladly wait for you to improve. Jai Yanren looked supportive. Han Sen felt himself going mad. Just when he wanted to explain, he heard someone else calling her. Jai Yanran then said to Han Sen, I'm going for a meeting. You should practice in the meantime. I won't disturb you, but make sure to get some rest. No, it's not like that. I can do it, I really can. Han Sen wanted to explain, but she had already hung up. Zhu Ting, I'm not done with you. Yelling continued to erupt from inside the room. Because Jai Yanran had to have a meeting, she turned off her communicator. In a frenzy, Han Sen ran to the teleporter and returned to the shelter. Zhu Ting, you son of a troll. Come out here. Boss, what is it? Zhu Ting left his room and couldn't help but notice Han Sen's soured expression. Zhu Ting turned and attempted to leave in a hurry, but Han Sen made sure to block his escape. Zhu Ting, you and your dreadful Jade Sun Force. Does it look like I need that sort of thing? My kidney is stronger than that of a titan. When I get hard, I sometimes scare myself. Han Sen scowled at Zhu Ting with dagger eyes and gritted his teeth. Zhu Ting felt a chill run down his spine. With a forced smile, he said, Boss, please don't get mad. This isn't what you think. Then what is it? Han Sen looked at Zhu Ting with murder in his eyes. Zhu Ting was genuinely afraid that Han Sen was going to beat him, so he raised his hands against Han Sen's chest while trying to explain as quickly as he could. This Jade Sun Force does improve a man's manliness, but that isn't the only thing that it does. Although using the Jade Sun Force could allow a man to do it 10 times without getting tired, a man such as you can already do that, surely. The benefit you can seek from the Jade Sun Force would not concern this. Of course, I can do that. Han Sen's face was starting to appear a little calmer. The Jade Sun Force's primary function is to strengthen a person's kidney. The kidney is a core organ of the human body, so its strengthening would yield benefits to your stamina, vitality, and power. What I presented to you was the real thing, taken from the Jade Sun tablet. It's not some crappy product you can order from a sleazy Skynet site. If you learn this hyper-geno art, you wouldn't even get winded after traveling 1,000 miles in a single day, Zhu Ting explained. You sure make it sound revolutionary. I'd wager it's not any different to those rubbishy mail-order products on Skynet, Han Sen said. It's not the same, I assure you, Zhu Ting said. When the Jade Sun tablet was unearthed, a great many people desired it. After much quarreling, it was broken. The tablet, as it once existed, can no longer be seen. However, a few copies of the original tablet do remain. I possess one such copy. I copied this one myself. The real stuff is too precious. I was just worried that you'd destroy the parchments in a rage if I hadn't been able to talk about this properly and explain it. I brought you a fake version, but if you really want it, I can provide you the genuine copy, Zhu Ting said quickly. Give me the real thing. But if I find out you have lying to me this entire time, do not blame me for being cruel to you. Han Sen stared at Zhu Ting with fierce eyes. Han Sen studied the new one that Zhu Ting had brought out. Its mere presence felt different to look upon, but he couldn't quite tell in what way. He then took the 3 fake copies in one hand and the real one in the other. He read them all side by side. The words were the same, and so was their color. But seeing the genuine thing, there really was a feeling you couldn't quite put your finger on. Any real hyper-geno arts always permeated its nearby atmosphere with a mystic hue, after all. See, boss, I told you I wasn't lying, Zhu Ting smiled. There are some slight, noticeable differences. Han Sen stared at the real copy multiple times, trying to identify the strange feeling it was giving him. 3 berserk mutant beast souls and 2 ordinary mutant beast souls. That is all I will offer you for this thing. Take it or leave it, the choice is yours. Boss, please give me more. This is a one-of-a-kind artifact. Zhu Ting clenched his teeth as he agreed to Sen's offer. Han Sen glanced over the documents he was about to receive in exchange, to ensure there were no problems or tricks to hand. He then sealed the deal. Han Sen turned and walked on a few steps, but he then turned around and asked Zhu Ting, once I have learnt this, can I truly take on 10 people at the same time? Thank you for watching. Subscribe and enable notifications so you don't miss the next chapter.